Hi, welcome back to Academic Market Insights. I'm Professor Russell Rhodes, joined by Dr. Larissa Adamiec from the Purdue Boilermakers, Elite Eight bound at this moment. We're recording, and this will actually be important with respect to what's going on in the NCAA tournament. We're recording the morning that they play in the Elite Eight, but we're both guaranteeing that they're going to win the national championship. With that, I'm going to hand things off to Dr. Adamiec, and we're going to talk about a phrase that we've used multiple times, but felt like it deserved an explanation: the K-shaped economy. So with that, I'm handing things off to you.
So the K-shape economy is exciting because our number one fan is a huge fan of the K-shape economy. It's something that we actually discuss quite a bit. And the K-shaped economy is in discussion about the recovery of an economic or the way that the economy is shaped or is working. And with the K, what we often see is that there's a subset that their recovery is doing very well. So their recovery looks like the top part of the K where it's upward and sloping versus a secondary group of people and their rebound from an economic event includes that their recovery is downward sloping. So we have two different uh, subsets of people responding differently to the same economic environment. A U-shaped is going to be a little more gradual. So again, this is how steep we're thinking about things versus if it's a V, we're going to have a much more severe. And we could even, if we wanted to, start talking about the degree of the angle itself. So the more acute it is, the closer the two subsets are tied together, and the wider it is, the two that are really just doing differently. Again, some people are going to be doing very well, so we have some winners, and then we have some people who are on the trajectory that is not positive. So people who are doing well in the K-shaped economy are going to be people who have assets. And that's because in the K-shape, in a positive rebound for the economy, those asset values are going up. And it's more than just real estate. It's actual assets in the markets, it's stocks, it's bonds, it's things like this that some of those higher income individuals or families have that allow for the development. And we also have lump in remote workers. So remote workers are not they're not going to be sensitive to things such as changes in oil prices because they're not driving as much. So there's a lot less of that type of pressure on them. Unfortunately, there are some people who don't make as much money, who don't have savings, who don't own assets, so they are not reaping some of those benefits. Usually, these are going to be individuals within the service sector. So, these are people who then physically have to go to work. If you are let's say, a nurse, for example, you would be somebody that would be required to show up to your job versus if perhaps you're a computer programmer, you could actually do your job from your own home. So that's a big difference in when we start to think about who's really benefiting and who's not benefiting in a K-shaped economy. And I would make the argument that owning those assets is going to be huge for this because what we're currently seeing right now is asset prices are going up substantially. And those who own those assets, then their net wealth has gone up. Uh, for example, when we think about the housing boom that we had in 2006, 2007, before the crash, the paper wealth, so to speak, of people who own those houses actually went up substantially. Just like if you had bought your house in 2018, 2019, and bought essentially almost at the bottom with a very low interest rate, and all of a sudden you've got this huge boom where your house has doubled in value, your net wealth on paper now makes it look like you are substantially more wealthy. However, if you don't have a home, you didn't reap any of those benefits.
Also, in the industry thing, or just back on the other thing, the service sector. Um, Service sector is more discretionary than the not some of the non-service sector stuff. So if you're one of the first things you do if you're worried about the economy is maybe you cut back how often you go out to eat and things like that. And that's why you don't want to. That's another reason you don't want to be in the service sector. And just with remote workers, because there's less overhead with respect to them, they're more attractive when things start to get a bit more expensive as well. Um, and it's almost white collar workers versus blue collar workers if you think about it. We're just
Right.
using slightly nicer phrases.
Well, and even in 2020, we're both from Chicago. So we had COVID hit, and all of a sudden, everybody's doing their job online. I think a lot of firms realized how much money they could save by ending their leases downtown
Yeah.
in the loop. It just was a substantial, and you're reducing that overhead. And if you don't have to, again, at the end of your lease, you're looking at this thinking, well, we've been just as productive, just as profitable. Why would we go back and spend more money on a lease?
Mhm.
So different industries do well. And again, to Dr. Rowe's point earlier, the losers in this would be travel. And these are going to be more discretionary purchases that we're looking at. So, for example, I was from a suburb of Chicago, and we had a very cute downtown area, and we had a lot of small firms. Those small firms struggled because they were discretionary goods that you could purchase. They had, I remember one store had the cutest little pillows that had, our zip code on it and things like that. Well, that's very discretionary as opposed
Mhm.
to if I'm going into a Costco and I need to buy meat for my family for the week or something along those lines.
Mhm.
That's not as discretionary. The different types of meats I buy are obviously going to be discretionary. So if I'm buying my kid king crab versus ground beef, substantially different. But again, these are more discretionary. Some industries lean better into the K-shaped economy, and those are going to be like the financial markets. These are larger firms. These are firms that have enough overhead and expertise to allow for some more of those remote workers. They've also have a bit of a moat built in. So, for example, there is less competitive pressures for some of these firms. Um, for example, if you are Citibank, you are not necessarily worried that a brand new bank is going to come in and start competing with you. A new bank might start up, but they're not going to be a competitor of Citibank. They might compete with JP Morgan, but again, there's only a handful of very, very large institutional banks that these companies are going to be working against. E-commerce has also the advantage of logistics and embedded pricing. So we're not relying on people to physically be able to go, especially if we're looking at an economy where people don't have the extra time to even do some of these shoppings because they're working extra hours just to make ends meet. So some of our factors, asset inflation. So we've spoken a couple of times on this channel about the possibility that there is an asset bubble. And those types of assets, what we're really talking about are things in the financial markets, stocks or equities. Those types of assets possibly are in a market bubble right now. And again, that's helping the top half of the K economy, and the bottom half who don't have access to those assets aren't reaping any of those benefits. Uh, I know this is one of Dr. Rowe's favorite things. It changes in technology because right now all the hype is surrounding around AI. And I know Dr. Rowe feels very strongly that AI will not be able to justify the costs the profitability in quite some time.
I can't imagine. I don't get it. But go ahead.
Yeah, so again, in changes in technology, what we're really getting at is the improvement of efficiency. And that's the goal of AI, right?
Mhm.
Is that we're more productive at our job. For example, as a professor, I was writing a letter of recommendation today. I did not use AI, but had I used AI, perhaps the amount of time that I spent writing this letter of recommendation would have dramatically, perhaps would have been easier for me. Um, I think the next one is the really challenging one.
I,
So when we think about monetary policy, we're now thinking about the Fed. And I'm going to put Dr. Rowe on the spot. Dr. Rowe, what are the two mandates for the Fed?
gosh, I don't know. No, I say it all the time, so that's why you're kind of making fun of me on that one. Maintain the best employment while trying to maintain, manageable inflation. And it's very difficult to balance those two sometimes because to get full employment or close to full employment, you want to cut rates. If you cut rates too much, it can spark inflation. If you have a period of time where you're worried about employment and inflation, the Fed, what their normal tools don't necessarily work for them. And I'm afraid that's where we are right now
Yeah,
in late first quarter 2026.
well, and it's funny because that's exactly where it's going to go with. If we're looking at actual inflation in our asset prices and we're trying to
Mhm.
look at reducing some of that, well, we should be raising rates to cut inflation.
Yep.
But if it's more expensive to do business, then companies are not going to be reinvesting and hiring new people, which will cause employment problems. And again, one side of the economy is going to be fine with this versus the other side is not going to. They're going to struggle substantially.
Yeah.
And then the response to volatility events. So, volatility events, and these are Dr. Ruo's specialty, but volatility events can just be anything that has a rapid change in prices. And we're very cautious about how we define a volatility event because it's not necessarily simply the stock market sells off 20% in one day or something. It can be a lot of different things. And again, our assets are going to respond differently. And how the firms who own these assets are going to respond differently.
Mhm.
So some firms are a little more quick to perhaps lay off people, which then will exasperate the K situation. And some are going to be a little bit slower, which will hopefully ease some of the K economy situation.
Mhm.
And I think this is the real crux of the problem,
Yep.
that economic inequality becomes much more pronounced. Um, we've been able to start to see that we are losing quite a bit of the middle class, and we're starting to go into a very defined two-class society, or two classes in economic senses. And as a result, we're really going to create a have and have not situation, which is not a desirable. I'm drawing a blank for a word, but like it's a dystopian type of environment. We don't want people to be in a situation where
No.
they could never get out. If you are on the bottom half, you never have the opportunity to actually improve your economic situation. This also creates political divides. Right now, we have politicians that some people really don't like and hate,
Yeah.
and some people really like what they're doing. And the aggression that individuals have towards each other because of this is not, again, a society that anybody's really looking at. And the trajectory of how we're creating these two classes then becomes very problematic. So a small change in that trajectory can have really huge implications in the long run.
Mhm.
And I think that's it for
Yeah.
our quick introduction to what the K-shaped economy is and why we need to be concerned about it.
And you can really just sum it up as when we have a K-shaped economy situation, it's the haves getting more and the have-nots getting less,
And
and
it's
and that just ends up rippling through. I'll quote. Was it Bill Clinton that said it's the economy, stupid? Eventually,
oh
eventually, everything works its way
yeah.
back to
Hmm.
what's going on in the economy. Um,
Yes.
and if people are happy, if people are happy with their lives, they're probably more likely just to retain whoever the leadership is. If not, replacements will come at the ballot box. So
And
there.
that they will.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for running through the K-shaped economy, and thank the folks that have stuck with us to this moment. If you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up, please. We're working toward 500 subscribers. If you're not subscribed, help us
Woohoo!
get to that number. And with that, again, we appreciate you watching, and we will see you the next time we come up with something really important to talk about.